This is crazy HOA life. And the timeline is absurd. You just earned yourself another violation. Deborah Parker shoved the laminated policy sheet toward my face hard enough that the corner grazed my jaw. Her crossbody bag stuffed with paper packets bounced against her hip as she leaned in. The portable thermal printer clipped to her belt whirred to life, already spitting out another violation slip before I had even responded to the first one. Behind her, an orange cone lay knocked on its side near the curb, tipped over during her march across the parking lot when she spotted me standing at the mailbox cluster. A delivery driver sat frozen in his truck at the curb, side mirror angled to watch the chaos unfold. I tightened my grip on the pen in my hand. I run a mobile detailing business in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and I depend on driveway access to do my job. Millstone HOA Incorporated had just sent me a fine notice for parking my work van in my own driveway overnight, claiming it violated a commercial vehicle restriction buried in a policy addendum I had never seen. When I requested a copy of the actual policy document and the meeting minutes where the rule was supposedly adopted, Deborah Parker, the gate access administrator, responded by screaming in my face that I would be reported for misconduct for requesting public information. That was 3 minutes ago. Now she was printing a second notice. I live in a place where gray areas equal HOA power grabs, and Deborah has turned vague policy language into a personal cash machine. She wears her authority like a weapon. Her blonde hair is always tucked behind her ears, her blue light jacket zipped high, her pink sun hat perched on her head even when the sun is barely up. Today, golden hour glare painted long shadows across the sidewalk between us, and her shadow stretched all the way to the curb where the delivery driver sat watching. I held up my phone. "I do not need your explanation. I need your payment," Deborah snapped, waving the fresh violation slip like a referee calling a foul. That is her catchphrase. She has said it to half the block at some point. Behind her, the thermal printer stopped whirring, and she ripped the slip free with a flourish. I stayed calm. "I just want the records. Public records. You are required to provide them under state law." Deborah stepped closer. "We can tow first and explain later. That is how enforcement works." Her breath fogged in the cold air. She pulled a handheld radio from her jacket pocket and keyed the mic. "This is gate admin. I need a tow dispatch to Unit 42 for non-compliance." The delivery driver climbed out of his truck. "Hey," he called, "is this really necessary?" Deborah ignored him. She stared at me, waiting for me to flinch. I wrote down every word, because later I planned to read them back to her. The tow call never went through. Deborah lowered the radio and glared at it like it had betrayed her. She keyed the mic again. Nothing. She slapped the side of the radio and tried a third time. Still dead air. I kept my phone steady. The doorbell camera on the clubhouse entrance 20 yards behind her was also recording. I had checked the angle earlier that morning when I walked past. Deborah shoved the violation slip into my hand. "You have 72 hours to pay, or we proceed with lien filing." She turned on her heel and marched toward the clubhouse, her crossbody bag swinging. The thermal printer bounced against her hip. The delivery driver watched her go, then looked at me and shook his head before climbing back into his truck. I stood there holding the slip, my breath visible in the cold air. The fine amount was $250. The violation code was listed as HC-12-B, which I had never heard of. The date on the slip was today, but the alleged violation date was listed as 6 days ago, which made no sense because I had not parked the van in the driveway 6 days ago. I had been on a job in Post Falls all day. That was the moment I realized this was not just about the van. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. 6 months ago, my neighbor 2 doors down, a retired teacher named Greg, had complained to the board about a mysterious fine for a mailbox flag violation. He said he had replaced the flag the day after he received the first notice, but Millstone HOA still charged him for non-compliance and backdated the violation to cover a second week. Greg paid the fine because he did not want the hassle, but he told me it felt wrong. He said the paperwork looked identical to a violation another neighbor had received the year before for the same mailbox issue, down to the wording and the code. I had written it off as bad luck at the time. Now I was starting to see a pattern. I walked back to my driveway and unlocked my front door. Inside, I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the Millstone HOA resident portal. I logged in and navigated to the documents section. The policy addendum Deborah had cited was not there. I searched for HC12-B in the rule index. No results. I tried searching the meeting minutes archive. The most recent uploaded minutes were from 11 months ago. Everything after that was missing. I sat back in my chair. My employer is watching my attendance, and one more late arrival ends my probation. I had already used 2 personal days this month dealing with HOA nonsense, and I could not afford a third. But if I did not fight this now, Deborah would bury me in fees and liens until I either paid or sold. I called my friend Jason, a local paralegal who helps people navigate small claims and consumer complaints. He answered on the second ring. "Jason," I said, "I need help with an HOA records request. They are stonewalling me, and the portal is a mess." Jason sighed. "Millstone?" "Yeah." "Deborah Parker?" "How did you know?" "Because you are the 4th person this year." He paused. "What did she hit you with?" "Phantom commercial vehicle rule, $250 fine, backdated violation date, no policy doc in the portal." Jason was quiet for a moment. "Okay, that tracks. Listen, do not pay anything yet. I am going to send you a template records request. Certified mail. Cite the statute. If she ignores it, we file a complaint with the State Consumer Protection Office." "What about the tow threat?" "Bluff. If she actually calls a tow company without a valid violation on file, and you have proof you were compliant, the HOA pays the bill, and you can sue for harassment. Document everything." "I am already recording." "Good." Jason paused again. "One more thing. There was a case last year involving Millstone, a vendor invoice scandal. Someone on the board was paying a shell company for services that never happened. It got buried fast. You might want to look into that." "I will. Thanks." I hung up and opened a new browser tab. I searched for Millstone HOA vendor invoice scandal. The first result was a local news article from 14 months ago. The headline read, "Millstone HOA board faces questions over unapproved expenses." The article was short. It mentioned that a resident had challenged a line item in the annual budget for maintenance services, totaling $18,000, but the board had refused to provide vendor documentation. The case was dropped after the resident moved out of the neighborhood. I clicked through to the next result. It was a forum post on a regional HOA complaint board. The user, anonymous, wrote, "Millstone board is running a quota system. Gate admin prints violations to hit monthly numbers. Fines get split between enforcement and a mystery compliance contractor. Check the ledger if you can get access." I leaned back. A quota system. Monthly numbers. Compliance contractor. I opened my email and started drafting the certified records request Jason had mentioned. I requested copies of all meeting minutes from the past 18 months, all adopted policy amendments, all vendor contracts, and the full ledger showing fine revenue and expenditures. I cited Idaho Code Section 30-3109, which requires HOAs to make financial records available to members within 10 business days of a written request. I printed 3 copies, signed them, and drove to the post office. I sent 1 copy certified mail to the Millstone HOA registered agent, 1 copy to the management company address listed on the website, and 1 copy to Deborah Parker personally at the clubhouse. When I got home, I found another notice taped to my front door. This one was printed on Millstone HO letterhead. It was not from the thermal printer, it was a formal letter on actual paper, and it was signed by the board president. The letter informed me that my records request was denied due to an outstanding violation balance. It stated that members with unpaid fines are not entitled to access non-essential documents until their account is current. It also stated that my request was considered frivolous and vexatious, and that any further requests would result in additional administrative fees. I read it twice. Then I took a picture and texted it to Jason. He called me back immediately. That is illegal. They cannot withhold records because of an unpaid fine. That is retaliation. File the complaint now. I am on it. I opened the Idaho Attorney General website and navigated to the Consumer Protection Complaint portal. I filled out the form, attached the denial letter, attached the original records request, and submitted it. The confirmation page said I would receive a case number within 3 business days. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the forum post. Check the ledger if you can get access. Deborah Parker controlled access to the clubhouse, the portal, and the records. If there was a hidden spreadsheet or a compliance contractor getting paid under the table, she was the gatekeeper. The next morning, I called the management company directly. A woman named Linda answered. I explained the situation and asked if she could provide the meeting minutes and vendor contracts. Linda put me on hold. When she came back, her tone had changed. Sir, I am showing that your account has a hold due to non-compliance. I cannot release documents while the hold is active. The hold is based on a bogus fine. I understand, but I am not authorized to override a board decision. Can you tell me who the compliance contractor is? Linda hesitated. I do not have that information in front of me. Can you check? I will need to escalate this to the board liaison. Who is that? Deborah Parker. I hung up. I spent the rest of the morning digging through old emails and documents I had saved from when I first moved into the neighborhood. I found the original HOA welcome packet, which included a copy of the bylaws and a list of board members. Deborah Parker was not listed as a board member. She was listed as Gate Access Administrator, a staff position, not an elected role. That meant she did not have the authority to deny my records request on behalf of the board. I pulled up the Idaho HOA statutes again and found the section on records requests. It was clear. Requests must be fulfilled by the board or the registered agent, not by staff. If Deborah had denied my request without board authorization, she had acted outside her authority. I drafted another email, this time addressed to the full board. I copied the registered agent and the management company. I attached my original records request, the denial letter, and a summary of the relevant statutes. I requested an immediate response and a timeline for compliance. I hit send. 2 hours later, I received a reply. It was from the board president, a man named Eric Holloway. The email was short. Your request is under review. We will respond within 10 business days per the statute. Please direct all future correspondence through the management company. I forwarded the email to Jason. He replied immediately. That is a delay tactic. They are hoping you will give up or pay the fine to make it go away. Do not. I took a screenshot of the email and saved it in a folder labeled HOA case file. That afternoon, I was in my driveway washing a client vehicle when a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman in a gray suit stepped out. She walked up my driveway holding a clipboard. Are you the owner of Unit 42? I am. She handed me a business card. I am with the management company. I am here to conduct a compliance inspection. I wiped my hands on a towel. I did not receive notice of an inspection. The notice was posted on the resident portal 3 days ago. I checked the portal this morning. There was no notice. She made a note on her clipboard. Well, I am here now. I need to inspect your exterior for violations. I crossed my arms. What kind of violations? Unapproved modifications, commercial activity, signage, vehicle parking. I do not have any of those things. She walked around my driveway, taking pictures with her phone. She stopped at my work van and took several close-ups of the magnetic decals on the side. Then, she walked to my front porch and took a picture of my doormat. When she finished, she handed me a copy of her inspection report. It listed 3 new violations: unauthorized business signage, commercial vehicle storage, and improper exterior maintenance. The total fine was $600. I stared at the paper. This is insane. You have 14 days to cure or pay. She turned and walked back to her car. I called Jason again. He did not answer. I left a voicemail and went inside. I sat at my kitchen table and read the inspection report line by line. The violations were vague and unsupported. The business signage violation referred to the magnetic decals on my van, which were removable and not permanent. The commercial vehicle storage violation cited the same phantom policy Deborah had mentioned. The exterior maintenance violation claimed my front porch paint was peeling, which was not true. I took pictures of my porch, my van, and my driveway. I uploaded them to a cloud folder and tagged them with the date and time. Then I pulled up the forum post again and read it more carefully. The user had written, "Fines get split between enforcement and a mystery compliance contractor. Check the ledger if you can get access." I opened a new search tab and typed Millstone HOA compliance contractor. No results. I tried Millstone HOA vendor payments. Still nothing. I tried searching the Idaho Secretary of State Business Registry for any company names associated with Millstone HOA or Deborah Parker. I found 3 entities: Millstone HOA Incorporated, Millstone Property Management LLC, and a company called Compliance Solutions Group LLC, registered 2 years ago. I clicked on Compliance Solutions Group. The registered agent was listed as Deborah Parker. I sat back and stared at the screen. Deborah Parker owned the compliance contractor. I called Jason again. This time he answered. "Jason, I found it. Deborah Parker owns the compliance contractor. She is paying herself with HOA fine revenue." Jason was silent for a moment. "Are you sure?" "I am looking at the Secretary of State Registry right now. Compliance Solutions Group LLC. Registered agent Deborah Parker." Jason exhaled. "Okay, that is fraud. If she is using her position to funnel HOA funds to her own company without board approval, that is embezzlement. You need to file a police report. I also need the ledger to prove it." "Right. You are not going to get that through a records request. She will block it. You need a subpoena or a court order." "How do I get that?" "File a lawsuit, small claims or civil. Allege financial misconduct and request discovery. The court will order them to produce the records." "How long does that take?" "Weeks. Maybe months." "I do not have months. My employer is already on my case about attendance. If I keep missing work for this, I am done." Jason was quiet. Then he said, "There is another option. If you can get someone on the board to leak the ledger, you can use that as evidence to escalate the complaint with the state. It is not legal advice, but it is faster. Who on the board would help me? I do not know. But someone there knows what Deborah is doing. Someone always knows. I thought about Eric Holloway, the board president. His email had been curt, but not hostile. Maybe he was just covering for Deborah out of habit. Or maybe he did not know the full scope of what she was doing. I opened my email and drafted a message to Eric. I kept it short and direct. Eric, I have reason to believe that Deborah Parker is using her position to funnel HOA fine revenue to a company she owns. I am requesting an emergency board meeting to review the financials and vendor contracts. If the board does not act, I will escalate this to law enforcement. I attached a screenshot of the Compliance Solutions Group registry page and hit send. The reply came within an hour. Your allegations are serious and unfounded. The board will not entertain baseless accusations. Any further correspondence of this nature will be referred to our legal counsel. I read the email 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Jason. He called me immediately. That is a threat. They are circling the wagons. You need to file the police report now. I am on my way. I grabbed my laptop, my phone, and the folder of documents I had been collecting. I drove to the Coeur d'Alene Police Department and walked into the lobby. A deputy at the front desk greeted me. I need to file a report for financial fraud. The deputy handed me a clipboard with a form. I filled it out and attached copies of the registry page, the violation notices, the denial letter, and the inspection report. I explained the situation in the narrative section, keeping it factual and chronological. When I finished, the deputy reviewed the form and nodded. I will forward this to our financial crimes unit. Someone will contact you within a few days. A few days? Yes, sir. They have to review the information and determine if there is enough evidence to open an investigation. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? The deputy looked at me sympathetically. I would recommend consulting with an attorney. This sounds like a civil matter that might require a lawsuit to resolve. I left the police station and sat in my truck. I felt the walls closing in. Deborah had the board, the management company, and the enforcement process locked down. She was printing violations faster than I could challenge them, and every day I spent fighting her was a day I was not working. I needed leverage, something that would force the board to act immediately. I thought about the forum post again. Check the ledger if you can get access. If the ledger showed monthly fine quotas and payments to Compliance Solutions Group, that would be enough to prove the scheme. But I could not get the ledger through official channels. Deborah controlled the portal, the management company, and the records. I needed someone on the inside. I pulled up the HOA directory and scanned the list of board members. There were 5 names: Eric Holloway, President; Sandra Mills, Vice President; Tom Jacobs, Treasurer; Rebecca Finch, Secretary; and Paul Nguyen, at-large member. Paul Nguyen. I remembered him from a community meeting 6 months ago. He had asked pointed questions about the budget and seemed frustrated when the board deflected. He had also voted against a proposal to increase enforcement fees. I found his phone number in the directory and called him. He answered on the 3rd ring. Paul, this is your neighbor from Unit 42. I am dealing with some HOA issues, and I think you might be able to help. Paul sighed. Let me guess. Deborah Parker? Yeah. What did she hit you with? Commercial vehicle violation, backdated fine, records request denied. And I just found out she owns the compliance contractor the HOA is paying. Paul was quiet for a moment. You found that? Yeah. Secretary of State Registry, Compliance Solutions Group, Registered Agent Deborah Parker. Paul exhaled. I knew something was off. I have been asking for vendor documentation for a year, and Eric keeps stonewalling me. He says it is proprietary information. It is not proprietary. It is embezzlement. Can you prove it? I can prove she owns the company. I need the ledger to prove the HOA is paying her. Paul hesitated. I do not have access to the ledger. Only Eric and the treasurer have that. Can you get it? Not without raising red flags. What if I file a formal complaint with the board? Would that force a review? Maybe. But Eric will bury it. He has been protecting Deborah since she started. Why? I do not know. Maybe he is getting a cut. Maybe he is just scared of her. She has a way of making people fold. I need help, Paul. If I do not stop this now, she is going to bury me in fees, and I will lose my job. Paul was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Okay, I will see what I can do, but I am not making any promises." Thank you. I hung up and sat in my truck. The sun was setting, and the golden hour glare had faded into cold blue twilight. I felt exhausted. I had spent 2 days fighting, and I had barely made a dent. But I had a name now, Compliance Solutions Group, and I had an ally, Paul Nguyen. That was enough to keep going. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the State Consumer Protection Office. It included a case number and a notice that my complaint had been assigned to an investigator. The email said the investigator would contact me within 5 business days to schedule an interview. I forwarded the email to Jason. He replied immediately. Good. That adds pressure. Keep documenting everything. I spent the rest of the morning working on client vehicles. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Paul Nguyen. I got something. Meet me at the coffee shop on Sherman Avenue in 30 minutes. I finished the job I was working on, washed my hands, and drove to the coffee shop. Paul was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a manila folder on the table in front of him. I slid into the booth across from him. What do you have? Paul glanced around, then opened the folder. Inside was a printed spreadsheet. No readable text, but I could see rows and columns of numbers. Paul pointed to one column. This is fine revenue by month. Look at the pattern. I leaned in. The numbers were consistent. Every month, the fine revenue was between $4,500 and $5,200. No variation. No dips. No spikes. That is not random, I said. No. Paul flipped to the next page. This is vendor payments. Same period. Look at the payee. I scanned the rows. One name appeared over and over. Compliance Solutions Group LLC. The payments ranged from $1,500 to $2,000 per month. She is taking a third of the fine revenue, I said. At least. Paul flipped to another page. And look at this. This is a list of violation codes. HC 12-B, HC 15-A, HC 18-C. None of these codes exist in the official rules. She is making them up. I sat back. How did you get this? Tom Jacobs, the treasurer. He finally cracked. He has been trying to get Eric to audit the financials for months, but Eric keeps shutting him down. Tom printed this for me last night. Does Eric know? Not yet, but he will soon. Tom is planning to bring it up at the next board meeting. When is that? 2 weeks. That is too long. I need this now. Paul closed the folder. I know, but Tom is scared. If he goes public too soon, Eric will fire him and Deborah will come after him next. You need to be the one to push this forward. How? Use this. Paul slid the folder across the table. Make copies. Send it to the state investigator. Send it to the management company. Send it to the attorney general. Make it impossible for them to ignore. What about you? I will back you up. But I cannot be the face of this. I still have to live here. I took the folder. Thank you. Paul stood up. Be careful. Deborah does not go down easy. I know. I drove straight home and scanned every page of the spreadsheet. I saved the files to my cloud folder and emailed copies to Jason, the state investigator, and the Attorney General Consumer Protection Division. In the email, I included a summary of the evidence and a request for an expedited review. Then I printed 3 copies of the spreadsheet and put them in labeled envelopes. One for the board president, one for the management company, one for the local newspaper. That afternoon, I was back in my driveway working when Deborah Parker pulled up in her car. She got out and marched toward me, her crossbody bag swinging, her thermal printer clipped to her belt. If you are enjoying this story, hit like and subscribe for more HOA cold case investigations. You need to stop spreading lies about me, Deborah said. Her face was red. Her hands were shaking. I straightened up. I am not spreading lies. I am sharing public records. Those records are confidential. They are not. They are HOA financial records, and members have a legal right to review them. Deborah stepped closer. You are going to regret this. I have friends in the sheriff department. I have friends on the city council. You think you can take me down with a spreadsheet? I pulled out my phone and started recording. Say that again. Deborah froze. She glared at the phone, then at me. Then she turned and walked back to her car. She got in, slammed the door, and drove off. I saved the recording and sent it to Jason. He called me immediately. That is witness intimidation. You need to add that to the police report. I will. The next morning, I received an email from Eric Holloway. It was a formal notice of a special board meeting scheduled for that evening. The agenda included one item: review of financial controls and vendor contracts. I forwarded the email to Jason. He replied, "This is it. They are going to try to contain the damage. You need to be there." I showed up at the clubhouse 30 minutes early. The parking lot was empty except for Deborah's car and a silver sedan I recognized as the management company inspector vehicle. I parked near the entrance and waited. At 6:55, other board members started arriving. Paul Meehan pulled up and gave me a nod as he walked inside. Tom Jacobs arrived next, looking pale and nervous. Sandra Mills and Rebecca Finch arrived together. Eric Holloway was the last to arrive, pulling up in a black SUV. I waited until 7 on the dot, then walked inside. The meeting room was small, with a folding table at the front and rows of plastic chairs. Deborah sat at the table next to Eric. Paul, Tom, Sandra, and Rebecca sat in the front row. I took a seat in the back. Eric called the meeting to order. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this is a closed executive session. Residents are not permitted to attend. I stood up. This is a financial review. Under Idaho law, financial discussions must be conducted in open session unless they involve pending litigation. Eric glared at me. This is a personnel matter. It is a financial matter. You are reviewing vendor contracts and fine revenue. That is public business. Eric looked at Deborah. She leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Eric nodded. Fine. You can stay, but you are not allowed to speak. I sat down. Eric opened a folder. We are here to address allegations of financial misconduct related to vendor payments and fine revenue. Tom, you brought this issue to my attention. Can you summarize your concerns? Tom cleared his throat. Over the past 18 months, I have noticed a pattern of consistent fine revenue and payments to a vendor called Compliance Solutions Group. When I requested documentation, I was told it was proprietary. Last week, I discovered that Compliance Solutions Group is owned by Deborah Parker. I believe this is a conflict of interest and may constitute self-dealing. Deborah stood up. That is a lie. Compliance Solutions Group provides legitimate enforcement services. I disclosed my ownership when I registered the company. Tom shook his head. There is no record of disclosure in the meeting minutes. Eric held up a hand. Deborah, did you disclose your ownership to the board? Deborah hesitated. I mentioned it informally. That is not disclosure. Paul leaned forward. You are required to disclose conflicts in writing and recuse yourself from any vote involving your company. You did not do that. Deborah pointed at Paul. You are twisting the rules. I am reading the bylaws. Eric closed his folder. Okay, we need to table this until we can consult with legal counsel. No. Tom stood up. We need to suspend payments to Compliance Solutions Group immediately and conduct a full audit. Deborah slammed her hand on the table. You do not have the authority to suspend anything. Tom turned to Eric. Do we have the votes? Eric looked around the table. Paul raised his hand. Sandra and Rebecca looked at each other, then raised their hands. Eric sighed. Fine. Payments to Compliance Solutions Group are suspended pending audit. Meeting adjourned. Deborah grabbed her crossbody bag and stormed out. I followed her into the parking lot. The next morning, I received an email from the state investigator. She introduced herself as Karen Liu, and she requested a phone interview to discuss my complaint. We scheduled a call for that afternoon. When she called, I walked her through the entire timeline. The phantom violation, the records request denial, the compliance contractor, the leaked ledger, the intimidation, the board meeting. Karen took notes. This is a strong case. I am going to recommend that we open a formal investigation. In the meantime, I am sending a letter to the HOA board requiring them to produce all financial records, vendor contracts, and meeting minutes for the past 3 years. How long will that take? They have 30 days to respond. If they refuse, we can escalate to enforcement action. What about Deborah Parker? If we find evidence of fraud, we will refer the case to law enforcement. You may also want to consider filing a civil lawsuit for damages. I am working on that. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept working and documenting. I received no new violation notices. Deborah stopped showing up at the clubhouse. Paul texted me updates. The board had hired a forensic accountant to review the ledger. The management company had terminated its contract with Compliance Solutions Group, and Eric Holloway had quietly resigned as board president. Then, 3 weeks after the board meeting, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Millstone HOA. The letter proposed a settlement. The HOA would refund all fines I had paid, cover my filing fees to end the fight, and revise the enforcement policies to require board approval for all vendor contracts. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue further legal action against the HOA. I called Jason. What do you think? Take it. You won. The HOA is covering your costs and fixing the policies. That is a good outcome. What about Deborah? The state investigation is still open. If they find enough evidence, she will face criminal charges, and the HOA will probably sue her to recover the embezzled funds. I read the letter again. There was one more paragraph. Deborah Parker has resigned from her position as Gate Access Administrator, effective immediately. I signed the settlement agreement and sent it back. 2 months later, I received a follow-up email from Karen Liu. The State Consumer Protection Office had completed its investigation and referred the case to the Idaho Attorney General for prosecution. Deborah Parker was charged with theft, fraud, and abuse of fiduciary duty. The total amount of embezzled funds was estimated at $72,000 over 3 years. The local newspaper ran a story. The headline read, "Former HOA Administrator Charged with Embezzling Fine Revenue." The article included a quote from the Attorney General. "This case demonstrates the importance of transparency and accountability in homeowners associations. Residents have a right to review financial records and challenge questionable practices." I saved a copy of the article and filed it in my HOA case file folder. That weekend, I ran into Paul Wynn at the grocery store. He shook my hand. "You did it. You took her down." "We took her down." Paul smiled. "The new board is a lot better. No more phantom violations, no more quota systems, just normal HOA stuff." "Good." "And Tom Jacobs is the new president. He is already planning a full policy review." "Even better." I went home and sat on my front porch. The orange cone that had been knocked over during my first confrontation with Deborah was gone, picked up by someone weeks ago. The delivery driver who had watched the chaos unfold probably had no idea how it all turned out. The doorbell camera on the clubhouse entrance was still recording. I pulled out my phone and opened the cloud folder where I had saved all the evidence. The doorbell video, the thermal printer recordings, the leaked ledger, the certified letters proving the HOA received my cure and fined me anyway. I had played it all on speaker outside the clubhouse so neighbors could hear it in real time, and it had worked. Deborah's bluff got read out loud, and the room reacted. Karen's favorite fee got proven imaginary in the ledger. The HOA paid my filing fees to end the fight. And I had a written records production schedule that Karen could not interfere with. It was over. I thought about the cold case that had started all of this. Greg, my neighbor, had paid a bogus mailbox fine and never fought back. Another neighbor before him had done the same. Deborah had been running the scheme for years, printing violations, collecting fines, and funneling the money into her own company. She had built an empire on gray areas and intimidation, and it had worked until someone decided to reopen the case and connect the clues. I had caught the culprit, I had exposed the scheme, and I had forced a resignation from leadership. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The golden hour glare was back, painting long shadows across the sidewalk. The air was cold. The neighborhood was quiet. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.